I was on a quest to find the best video game controller ever made. And then I got lost and found a lot of really good and bad ones. And when trying to find the best controller ever, there are some obvious answers. Obviously, some of those obvious answers would be the new Xbox Series controllers with their incredible grips and just the way they feel to hold in my hand. Another obvious one would be ones that change the industry, like the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con. Just a simple, small design that can do so much with just a compact design. But then I think in order for it to be good, it has to be out of the box, but also stick to what everyone likes. When this comes to mind, I immediately think of the Xbox 360 controller, which is compact, but also features 3D buttons, and just the way it feels in my hand is unlike anything I've ever played before. You know, as they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is now why we have the Xbox One and Xbox Series controllers, which kind of took this and made it a little bit more sleek. I think the new ones are better, but I definitely don't know why they got rid of such a good design with the Xbox 360. Another obvious choice would be the PlayStation 5 DualSense controllers. Now, I don't have those on hand. I wanted to point those out because they're so innovative, they're so nice, they feel good to hold. However, they are kind of clunky and super heavy, which is why I don't think they fit everyone when playing video games. Then when I get my mind on PlayStation controllers, I think of the older PlayStation controllers like this PlayStation 3 controller. The only problem with this one is it's way too compact and small. I don't know if you can see it, but my hands like go the entire way over the controller. And holding it the way it's supposed to just feels awkward with how small and minuscule this thing is. Again, when I said out of the box, I meant out of the box, but I didn't mean way too far out of the box. The Wiimote seems like an obvious choice given its size and it's out of the box and it's different from all the other ones. It's innovative. It was the first controller to ever widely use motion controls for gameplay, but when you use it, there are no joysticks on it and it's nothing more than a stick. That's the Wiimote. I don't think we should go with the Wiimote. So if we're not going with a classic Nintendo controller, we're not going with a new or sometimes old Xbox controller, what's the best controller ever? We've already talked about the controller needs to be out of the box, the controller needs to be innovative and new, and the controller needs to not be small like the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con and the PlayStation controllers, meaning there's only one controller that's left, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna surprise you. Yes, it's true, the best controller ever is the original Xbox Duke controller. Given our criteria, this thing checks off all the boxes. It has the 3D buttons like the Xbox 360 controller. It has innovativeness given that it was one of the best controllers of the time. And it's not entirely small because when I hold it in my hand barely goes over it. So given the criteria we put ourselves in, we find ourselves at the conclusion that the Xbox Duke controller is the greatest controller ever made. I mean, it's super easy to plug in with this giant cord as well as the ports in the back that were required in order to use this thing. Actually, if you want to use this today, there are options to buy it. However, you're going to have to buy a wired Duke controller. So Xbox, please bring back the Duke and make it wireless and don't change anything. I like the fact that there are no bumpers making it super hard for me to press these buttons up here. I like the fact that it's absolutely massive and that I can't reach the numpad with my other hand at all. It's stressing me out. But I just love this controller. It's absolutely massive, it's super heavy, and I love how inaccessible it is. So with all of our criteria, like we said before, the Xbox Duke controller is the best. But I also kind of wanted to take this video to talk about the Duke controller because the Duke controller is the most important controller in history. Let's watch it. The Duke controller is the most important controller of all time. There's no debating that. At a time where all controllers were hard to use or boxy or just too small, the Duke controller changed all of that. And as you can see, the way it was made is way different from any other controllers. You see, the Xbox team had a very difficult task in making a new controller. And the reason that the Duke controller has this little bump in the bottom here, while most controllers are seen to have the opposite. It curves up or it's straight like the Xbox Series S controller and later the Xbox 360 controller. The Duke controller was made by creating the motherboard first and then creating this shell and buttons to house around it, which is super weird, but it eventually became the reason why this controller is so massive in the first place. The Duke would later lead to the invention of the next Xbox controller, which was widely regarded by fans as one of the best Xbox controllers ever, given the fact that it took everything people liked about the Duke and condensed it and made it easier to use, which eventually, of course, led to the creation of the Xbox 360 controller, which kind of resembles the controller that very closely preceded it. The Xbox 360 controller eventually changed the game. The only thing people didn't like about the Xbox 360 controller was this massive battery backup that had to be used in the controller itself, making the batteries and the controller itself relatively heavy, but if it weren't for the Duke controller, it wouldn't at all be possible. And the Duke controller is my favorite controller in my collection. Obviously, second would be the Xbox 360 controller, but if it weren't for the Duke controller, we wouldn't have any of the other controllers. There would be no Xbox 360 controller, there would be no Xbox One controller, no Series controller, and with that, no Xbox Design Lab. But that's why I like the Xbox controllers. They're innovative, they're new, and you get to make your gaming experience with your controller your own, which is why there's a ton of different controllers you can use for your Xbox right now, whether it be wired, wireless, colorful, black and white. It doesn't really matter. But with all that being said, that is why the Xbox Duke controller is my favorite controller I own, is the best controller for gaming, and is the most important controller ever made in gaming history. And with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave a thumbs up if you play video games. And as always, I will see you beautiful people on the flip side. Goodbye, everybody.